Everyone, welcome back to the Weekly Politics Show. I'm Councillor Premier with co-host Councillor Andrew Wood. We're joined on my phone, on loudspeaker, by veteran journalist Peter Oborne. Peter is well known as an investigative journalist. He wrote for the Daily Telegraph regularly up until 2015, and then for the Daily Mail as their political editor. Also, Peter is known for his investigative journalist pieces, including Channel 4 Dispatches, as well as for the Middle East Eye. Peter has had local involvement in terms of Citizens UK. He was a part of the panel about Muslims in public life. So we're going to kick it off with questions to Peter. Peter, you've written extensively about the decline in our political culture, starting off with the Blair years, where you've been very critical of the political class and the decline of political ethics, the decline in institutions, including the neutrality of the civil service. And you've written extensively, including criticism of the Cameron years. There is a piece that you've put out recently that's been published again by Open Democracy that you originally wrote for the Daily Telegraph. And recently you've written a book critical of the Johnson government and their approach to truth and facts and how they seem to get away with it. Peter, what lessons, in terms of where we're going in terms of national politics, what lessons can you think we could draw from the Afsana Begum trial in the sense of public institutions? There is an accusation that public funds was used for what many people perceive a political persecution of a prosecution. That's the angle. I'll allow Andrew to come in from the other perspective. Peter?
Firstly, apologies for not showing my face, as it were. I'm too competent to make things like Facebook or YouTube work. I let you down badly, but I'm very proud to be on the program. And I don't know the details of the trial. I don't want to lead to any conclusions. It could be that it was simply that authorities simply cases against people and they, British justice is good and you're innocent, you can't prove, the prosecution can't prove guilt. He's the person who gets off, and that's how it should be in this country. To talk generally, there are all kinds of reasons for alarm, stretching back to the Iraq War and before, to worry about the confusion of categories really in British public life. The legal profession, the rule of law, the just high court, courts should be completely independent of the police and from the judiciary should be independent of the of politicians, and the justice that you should not be able to use the rule of law for criminal justice, and then there's the other matter of political integrity, the embedded principle of fairness in British public life and honesty, which is that we have a common area of facts on which all of us can agree, and it's wrong that we should be able to abuse those facts. And that is what I've done in my recent book on Mr. Boris Johnson, the British Prime Minister, who manipulates, cheats, lies, schematically fabricates, and he was a member of an ordinary person who you knew you didn't have any business with. You wouldn't do business with him. He worked in the city and he tried to sell shares on the basis that he tried to sell winning votes. He'd be arrested and sent to jail for fraud.
Okay. Andrew, do you want to come in? Because obviously, Andrew, you've been looking at it's kind of interesting how the trial has split people locally. One section see it as a political persecution. Another section has more questions in terms of the local MP and her conduct. Andrew, do you want to come in on from that angle in terms of what Peter's been saying as well about our national culture?
So I think, yes, I mean, that's part of the problem locally, is opinion is split between those two opposing views. And I think the other part of the problem is there's not a lot of information in the public domain that can be trusted or is accurate to actually allow people to sort of draw an accurate conclusion. I think I probably know more than most people because I attended, several days or more than several days of the trial itself. So I have my personal view, but I didn't attend the whole trial either. But I think probably the one clear lesson for me, and I think most people would agree on, and I think this is slightly different from what we've just been discussing, is what is unusual in this case is it's actually the local authority, Tower Hamlets Council, that is the prosecuting authority. And I think that is relatively rare in the UK to have such a high-profile trial actually started, initiated, and controlled by Tower Hamlets Council itself. And I think really for me the question is A, whether in this particular case they should not have passed that on to somebody else, and I think there are reasons why they should have done. And then B, it does raise wider issues about whether actually local authorities should have this power in the first place. And one of the comments I've made back to the local authority and to the audit committee and to the chair of Ovian Scrutiny is, I've been a councillor for more than 7 years now. We've not once in my experience ever actually looked at how we do this process. How does a local authority decide to prosecute somebody? What are the internal checks and balances? How do we ensure that the politicians stay out of it? I'm convinced that John Biggs stayed out of this, but I have no evidence for that. I just know that's what he would do. So how can we be sure that it was free from political control? So it does raise a whole wide range of issues, because at the end of the day, the local authority does have the power to prosecute somebody and send them to jail potentially for years of their life. And then on the back of that has the ability through poker and various other things to then reclaim, very large amounts of money from people as well. And I'm not sure whether we as local authorities should actually have that power. I'm not sure I trust us enough to have that level of responsibility. So I think that's a slightly difference from the national picture. And then therefore the suggestion should be is that somebody like the CPS should be doing this kind of job.
Yeah, I'm actually quite surprised by what Andrew's saying there. It seems odd. Andrew, can I ask you a question? Presumably it is the civil servants, the officials, who have that power to launch a prosecution, not the actual elected councillors.
Yes, in my understanding is exactly that. But one of my points is that process isn't really written down or documented within Tower Hamlets Council. So I know that, for example, Mayor John Biggs, he's such a capable politician. I would be astonished if he got personally involved in the detail of this trial. But another leader under different circumstances, who knows? I have no comfort from what I know as to exactly what the internal, the Chinese walls were within the council as to who knew what about this case. And I think that's one of the things that worries me about local authorities having these powers, is that a lot of this stuff is just not visible.
I completely agree with you. I think this needs to be discussed and explained. If you took this to a national level and say the Priti Patel's Home Office had the right to prosecute without going through the proper procedure of going to the CPS, Crime Prosecution Service, so it was independent and there was an independent process and a legal process. I think a lot of people would find that very troubling. Or again, taking another example, if the Department of Wealth Pensions have the right to prosecute people directly for fraud, it obviously is much better. It's essential that that right is passed over to the Attorney General and the Crime Prosecution Service, and so they're taken away from the people who have, maybe compiling the evidence and so on.
Yeah, because I think one of the problems we've now got is that we've got a local authority and one of its two local MPs. They've just tried to prosecute. So how that working relationship is going to work for the coming years is going to be very interesting. But it's in everybody's interest that the two of them, the MP and the local authority, are able to work together on common issues. And I think that's another reason for trying to separate out the ability to prosecute, either in this case or more generally. It's also councillors. So we've actually had three councillors, but it's only the last two cases. We've had two Tower Hamlets councillors who've been prosecuted by Tower Hamlets Council for housing fraud. In both cases, they actually pled guilty and they were sent to jail. So this has been our third case of this kind, but in this case, the MP, and in this case, it wasn't successful. So it's not just MPs that we prosecute. Councillors.
Ordinary state of affairs, and I think most people in this, obviously I don't live in Tower Hamlets, I don't know much about it, it's day-to-day life. I mean, it sounds absolutely astonishing that the Tower Hamlets could directly prosecute an MP. And given, I think it is fair to say that Tower Hamlets is notorious for sort of sectarian division and so on, and acrimony. Is that a fair comment?
Andrew, do you want to come in on that?
So all I'll say is Tower Hamlets is probably the most interesting political place in the United Kingdom, if we exclude maybe Scotland. But it is a very interesting place, but deep divisions in a range of areas, high levels of inequality, and very interesting political environment as well. So we're not really like many other parts of the United Kingdom. So,
by the way, it's a wonderful place. I go there. I love going to Tower Hamlets. I don't want to get full of brilliant people. It's just that there is a reputation in politics, particularly lively, shall we say, to use a polite word. And makes it all the more, concerned that the council itself can directly launch a legal prosecution and against the local MP. That's quite something, isn't it? It's quite an odd thing to happen. And I think and if that it does launch an action against the local MP, very serious, must of course, the MP. Some of them begged an enormous stress and made it very difficult for her to do her job representing her constituents, and taken her away from sort of being in Parliament. There have got to be questions to answer and explanation about how the decision was made, given that she was found to be innocent. We're gonna go straight into a break. After the break, we're gonna have a discussion about how we can make things better. How can we strengthen institutions? How can we strengthen our political culture? How can we have more checks and balances? We're gonna start from the national level. Pete has written extensively about the problem, and then see what we can do locally. So we're going to go straight into